Hey everyone, skip to like a minute in if you don't want to hear me talk. This video, recording same day as yesterday's video, I'm going to publish this officially tomorrow. But it's on custom UI, and I really wish I had time to do a 2 or 3 hour custom UI deep dive. It's a very big topic and there's a lot to talk about. Unfortunately, I need to make this tutorial for one of our interns who's working on something that needs some buttons. And so we're going to be building on the previous Boombox tutorial. I'm very excited about that. But custom UI, like, you will not have enough from this to be building other custom UIs. And unfortunately, I just need to get that other video done. It's on my to-do list. I'll get it to you soon. If you are going to try to continue pursuing custom UI on your own after watching this video and the other custom UI video, I think there's another one. There might not be. There's a couple. There's the screen overlay video might be a good one to look at. But basically, what you need to know is that custom UI is basically like boxes inside of boxes. So you got this one giant box, which is your user interface, and you put another box inside of that box, and you can give it parameters. Then you can put a box next to that box, but then you can put a box inside of that box. And if that doesn't make sense, wait for my deep dive. It will make a lot more sense when we get there. I do actually have a tutorial, now that I think about it, that is public. It's a text-based tutorial on this topic. Let me go ahead and pull that up real quick. Go to the Learn website, and this is the text entry tutorial. It's definitely not this one. Let's scale that correctly. And Custom UI API Introduction. Here you are. So this one is a fantastic, like this is what I want to make the video. Like I want to make the video based off of this tutorial that I made and extrapolated upon with so many things I've learned since I made this. But if you want to continue on Custom UI afterwards, I'll make sure to link this in the description. Maybe I'll even put it at the top of the comment section. So here you can see the boxes inside of boxes. So we're creating our first box, and then we create a few boxes. So now you can see the different layers of boxes, and then we make more boxes. And you can start imagining as you're organizing your stuff in this grid. Anyway, that is enough on that. Check that out after this if you'd like to continue your work on custom UI before I get that video made. And let's dive into Horizon. So opening up Horizon Worlds. And what we want to do is expand upon the Boombox. And so right now the Boombox is using triggers. And while that works, it's not fantastic. It's like a totally acceptable approach in like many versions of Horizon. But for our mobile players who need to see the buttons a little bit more clearly, and for our VR players who want to be able to like raycast maybe at a distance to click the buttons and not have to walk all the way up to touch it. Depending on your use case, it might not even be possible. The one that we're building, you will not be, as a VR player, able to reach the buttons from where you're at. So having a raycast is going to be super useful. So let's go ahead and get that set up. Now we should have a Boombox world if I'm not mistaken. Let's see, all worlds. Do we have the Boombox world? Did I put it somewhere else? There it is, Boombox tutorial. Here we go. I'm gonna slurp on some bubbly water. So good. Sorry if you didn't enjoy that. But I did, it was really delicious. All right, here we are back in the Boombox world. Great to have you guys in here for Boombox Part 2. And we have 2 buttons. And basically what we want to do is make it so that our custom UI triggers these buttons. And there's so many ways to do this. And I've really been debating how I want to get these buttons to trigger. Because I think it's actually a really great approach to start with just something simple like a trigger and then come back later and add custom UI if you have time. And so in this case, let's just go and open up the script. So we've got our play pause, open an external editor. We have this data file, which stores our tracks, which have track names and audio gizmos. I'm actually just reminding myself because I haven't been here in a while, and maybe you haven't seen the video in a while, or maybe you haven't even seen the Boombox video. You don't need to. Because what we're working on today is primarily custom UI. We have the play pause button, the play pause music trigger. So what is this? Oh, this is the track. So this registers the track. It's adding itself using push, and that puts it inside the array. It has a default name here, and that is fantastic. Now that that is all good and we understand it, we can see that our play pause music trigger is currently doing a bunch of stuff. And I'm thinking, what if we make a function file? It just makes sense to me. So let's go scripts. Sorry, my throat, you're hearing me cough. It's because I'm actually allergic to bubbly water and my throat is like rejecting it, even though I enjoy it. My serious apologies about that. I should know better. I should just drink water. What's wrong with me? I just like it so much. So we're going to mirror the names of our previous files. So we have the play pause music track underscore function. And so this is going to be our function file. And what's nice about this is by moving our methods into functions, we're going to be able to call them from our custom UI and basically just delete this trigger script when we're done. So the trigger script will be an intermediary to make sure it's still working. But yeah, let's go check out this function file and see how we can get this to work. So first of all, because it's a function file, we don't need a component, so we can delete this class. We can then start by creating an exported constant. I like to mirror the name of the file, so we'll call this play, and I already have this one down here with the same name, so I'll just click enter, backspace data, and change it to function. So now we've got a play pause music track function file, which is going to be a JSON object, so a bag of stuff. We can then put our functions inside that bag of stuff, so we can create a function which we'll call example, and then curly braces, and then to export this function, we simply type example, comma. Fantastic. Now we're going to rename that here in a minute, but let's go back to our trigger and see what we are doing when the trigger is entered. So we have connect code block event, and we connect the code block event for skip track trigger. So we have the skip track trigger, and we're connecting the on player enter. Oh, and then this dot entity is the play pause trigger. Okay, so we have play pause trigger being called, and we have next track trigger being called. You'll notice that because I set this up using the automatic, it came with the dot binding, and I didn't change that to the arrow function, which is totally fine if you're using the default trigger script. And if you don't know what that means, go back and watch the video because I explain it there. But like really not important. The point is this is going to call play pause trigger when on player is entered, and this is going to call next track trigger. Now that means we have two functions here, and it looks like there's also this toggle music that's happening, and there's like updating a text display. There's honestly quite a few things happening here that all are correlated. And I think what we're going to need to do is take everything inside of this and export it. So all of this needs to be exported. Cut, go up here, delete this, paste, and now it's going to be upset because these are not functions, they are methods, so we need to convert them to functions by typing function in front of it. And so now we have the function play pause trigger. It needs a player. Because we haven't defined that here at the top, we need to import this explicitly, control period, press enter. Now we've added our explicit import for the player. And all of these this dots that are going to cause us errors, we're just going to ignore that for now. If I hit Shift Alt F, it's going to look a little bit prettier, and we can just copy paste this here. So Shift and arrow to the right to copy the space as well, Control C. And then we can paste Control V, Control V, and Control V. There we go. So now we've converted these all to functions. Oh, one more. And Control V. And the first thing I want to do before we go fix everything, there's a lot here to fix, but we'll get there, is by looking at this script, we can see we no longer need this. So I'm just going to delete that line. There's actually a lot of stuff in here that's no longer needed. I really shouldn't spend any time on this, but my brain, for whatever reason, just doesn't like seeing the grayed out ones. So I feel like I have to delete them. Anyway, now I feel better. What we can see here is we had this skip track trigger. We are no longer going to need that. We will still need the text display and the tap sound effects. We'll come back to getting those in a minute. I'm going to put red dots next to these. And there we go. And we also have these local variables that we were using, so we're going to have to come back and grab those in a minute too. And the next thing we need to know here is we've got pre-start, connecting code block events. We don't need to do any of the connecting events since we're not doing that anymore. We're going to get the events connected from the custom UI. And I mean, I guess we should try to get it working, right? We should show that it works. You really want to make small incremental changes. So let's just prove that it works still with triggers. We'll come back to this in a second. But in start, we need to update the text display. So the first thing I want to do is grab this update text display function and move that maybe to the top of the document since it's the first thing called on start. So move that all the way up. There we go. And then where example was, we just copy this name, Control-C, Control-V. Now to update this text display, we are going to need the text gizmo available. And that's going to be done inside of our data file. We have the data file right here, and right now we've only exported tracks. But now we want to have a text gizmo, sorry. The word slipped my mouth. So we're going to just add that right here. We'll say constant text display is of type text gizmo or undefined. And I need to change it from a constant to a let so that way we can update it on world start. And then we can export it right here as text display and comma and control save. Okay. So we'll come back to our script over here, and on start, we need to define this. So we'll go to the very beginning of start and then call the data file, which is the play pause music track data dot text display equals props dot text display dot as parentheses text gizmo. And this is happy even with the question mark, because the question mark says if this isn't a valid value, it's undefined. So we're just going to stop running code that comes after this. This dot as has no effect, and we're just going to return undefined. And so you can set text display to undefined, which is why it's okay, because this is either going to be undefined or a text gizmo. Now we know that we've referenced the property in the properties panel, so this will be filled out, so it will be a text gizmo, but that's why we're not getting any errors. Okay, so now that we've got this set up, we can go back into our play pause track, and we can now reference this text gizmo by calling the play pause music track data dot text display. And we just need to add the question mark here. And so this question mark, once again, is saying if this is undefined, don't run the code after this. And now it's going through, and we need to know the current track. And so I don't tend to put variables in my function files with this one very specific case, which is where if the variable is like a current track, something that needs to be changed by the functions but not used by anybody else. In that case, that is where I would put it in the function file. So right here above display, we'll put the current track, and we'll define that as a let. So we'll say let current track equals 0, and then we can backspace this dot, which will now refer to current track. So now this update text display totally works. Converting a method to a function might seem a little overwhelming. I do it pretty frequently though, so it's something that we're going to do a few more times, and hopefully that builds some muscle memory if you followed the first Boombox tutorial. For reference though, if you don't want to follow the Boombox tutorial but still want to follow along, you can pull the Boombox out of the asset library, under asset library public assets, search by creator, type in Vidyuu, and you will find that we've actually shared this publicly, the original version at least. There it is. And here is that Boombox. So you can pull that out along with some of our others. Do note that you need to leave the world and come back for the scripts to appear. The scripts will not be present when you first pull it out. It's a Horizon bug. It might be fixed by the time you're watching this, but presently that's how that works. Okay, let's keep rolling right along here. So now update text display can be called here on start by calling the play pause function file dot update text display. So now this code is happy. Fantastic. Now, the next thing we need to do is go and figure out which one of these functions we want to tackle next. I'm thinking we're going to use the play pause trigger as our next one. So we'll go to play pause trigger, and we can see that that is our next one here. So we're going to copy this, Control C, and Control V, and comma, and Control Save. And back over here, we're going to convert this back into an arrow function, so it's a little bit more familiar since I don't teach dot bind this, as that's not the Horizon way of doing things. If you know, you know. Parentheses, player, I don't have time to talk about it, is what I mean by that. Player is our parameter that we're getting, and as you guys are pretty familiar, I hope at this point, with player enter trigger, we then call the function, and then that's the function is the curly braces, and then in these curly braces, we can now call that play pause function file dot play pause trigger parentheses player at passing in player. There we go. And I'll add a semicolon because I like semicolons. Shift Alt F to make it pretty. It looks like it is. And we just need to do the same thing down here with the skip track trigger. We noticed that I did delete the property for skip track trigger, like silly me. Let me bring it back real quick. Control C, Control V. And we did, we'll come back to this later. There's a few more steps here than I realized, but it's okay. So now this skip track trigger needs to connect to the next track trigger. So we might connect that real quick before coming into here. So here's the next track trigger script, or function, excuse me, export that as well. And then coming back up here, we can, and just for reference, if you really want some like shorthands here, you can actually just do this, play pause music track function. Technically that works, okay? It's just not as familiar because we haven't really talked about bindings. What a binding does is it automatically passes through the parameters to this function. The problem is it doesn't really check for errors. So if you change the parameters, you're not going to get an error. And there's just a few other ways where you're just not going to get errors. So I highly recommend you switch this back to using if you're going to make substantial changes to the default trigger script, I do recommend changing it to be a way that's less likely to have a bug. I cannot tell you how many times, but it's at least 5 where I've had a bug with the dot bind that took me forever to discover, whereas an arrow function will catch that same bug. So that's why, as a group led by Shards, thank you Shards for creating this document of like fundamental principles that we follow in Horizon. This is why we do that. It's because it's less likely to cause issues, and if we all follow it, we're going to save ourselves literally countless hours across the entire group of people. All right, going into the functions, we can now call our next track trigger function, passing in the parameter player. There we are. Adding a semicolon because I like semicolons, and then Shift Alt F to beautify, Control Save. All right, so that is now connected. Sorry, we went off on that tangent. I just can't help but teach in any moment where it feels like we need to teach it. So hopefully that helps. Continuing on, we have finished these two, but we need to get these working. And so we had current track. We can see that there's a last click in here. And this is just to prevent, right, like the clicking of it too fast. But this was really designed for triggers, whereas this is now going to be custom UI, so that's interesting. See, with a trigger, it was possible that you might accidentally flicker touch it with your VR hand, but with a custom UI, it's much less likely, and you're probably intentionally double-clicking. So I believe we can get rid of this code here. So we'll go ahead and delete that, Shift Alt F. Now we have play tap sound effect. Now that's a good one. Now that's a function that we actually have in this file. So if I backspace the this dot, it will now refer to the play tap effects function. And we can see we're passing in the player, and we need to pass in the position. Because this is about to switch to custom UI, we will no longer have trigger positions. So I'm actually going to delete this code, as there will no longer be trigger positions very soon. So we'll just leave that error for a moment. We'll fix it momentarily. We also have toggle music, which we can delete right here, which will just connect to the toggle music function below. We can also see that we were updating the last click, which we can now delete. We also no longer need a current time, so we can delete that as well. And that is what play pause trigger is going to do. So continuing down, let's quickly fix the play tap effects function so it no longer requires a position, and we will fix that when we get back to it. And then we can now see that this function is clear and good to go. Now the next track trigger is also going to play tap effects, so we can delete the this dot to get that to link up. It no longer needs the position either, so we can delete that. We can see that next track is being calculated using current track, so we just delete the this dot to link it to the current track value up here. And this is all working fine. We have this dot is playing, which I believe is a variable from up here, just like our current track was. We are no longer using last click or these vector positions, so let's just delete that while we're at it. And we're going to move is playing into that file, so let's Control X that out of here. We also can delete these two lines as we no longer are tracking those positions. So backspace that. Control save. And right over here, we need this is playing to be a local value. And I'm thinking we're going to just put it right next to current track. We'll then also type this one as a let, Shift Alt F to make it pretty, Alt arrow, oops, that was Command arrow. Whoa, whoa, my goodness, sorry about that. I clicked all the wrong buttons. Let's just reopen that, there we go. Alt arrow down is going to move it down. And now, if we go back here, we can just delete the this dot so that it uses the local is playing value. Perfect. We can do the same thing here for current track. And so far, so good. We can do the same thing here for current track and the same thing for update display. So a lot of this is just removing the this dot because this dot referred to this class, but we're no longer in that class. So we're just kind of removing all of that class specific stuff. Control save. And then back over here, we continue going on to the next one. We have toggle music. We just delete the this dot for is playing. And right here as well. And we have the same thing here. And the audio gizmo is being played or paused. So we have tracks, this dot current track, we just delete that. Perfect. Perfect. And then we have our tap effects. And so, so we've done it, right? Like we're clearing through these functions very quickly. And we're only exporting the ones that need to be called from our main script, which will be converted to our custom UI script momentarily. And so our toggle music here is done. Now our play tap effects does need to have a link to the tap sound effects, so we need to put that into our data file. Coming over here, we can just duplicate this line, Control C, Control V, changing this from text gizmo to audio gizmo, and changing this from text display to tap sound effects. And then we can export our tap sound effects and Control save. Then over here on world start, we can export this into the file by doing the same thing we did here. So Control C, Control V, change this to tap sound effects, change this property to tap sound effects as in audio gizmo. And that has now been set up. I think we can turn off these red dots now, as those are now looking pretty good. And right here, we can now remove this dot props and reference sound effects from the play data file. There we are. And because it's an audio gizmo, we actually no longer need this dot as audio gizmo. We can actually delete that. Perfect. But we do need a question mark in case it is undefined. And continuing on, we can see, oh, we were using the position to determine if they were tapping it with their left or right hand. But we're no longer allowing right hand and left hand clicking, like tapping with your hand, your physical hand. So they're going to be using their raycast, and there isn't really a way to determine if they were right-handed or left-handed with their raycast, at least not accurately. Like you could make some guesses, but it could create a weird user experience. And I don't really think we need it. So we're just going to go ahead and delete that. So in some ways, you might say this has degraded the experience. And coming back to the camera here, you might be right. So button tapping in VR, phenomenal. But what we're really trying to show here, apologies for the sirens in the background, but what we're really trying to show here is how easily you can make this compatible with cross screens. So the goal is to make it cross screens compatible. And I do think I'm like debating whether I wait. Background, oh no, it's really low, isn't it? But for me, it's like super loud. Cross screens does degrade the experience. It absolutely does. And anyone who tells you differently has ignored one simple fact, which is that VR has so much difference in input control, right? Like as a VR user, you can grab things with your hand and rotate them and move them around and do things that just are not possible on a mobile or web device. And from that single differentiation, you have immediately, by making it mobile compatible, lost a lot of what makes it so much fun in VR, and you could very easily be wiping out features. So we have a feature we're working on for our build, and the feature is really fantastic in VR. You grab a thing and you place it down and it locks in place, and then you can like utilize that to build stuff. It's pretty cool. It's akin to Meta Blocks, but completely different. You can't really do that on mobile, so what we're designing as an alternative is a separate mobile interface. So we're building it twice now. So we got one experience for the VR players, and then for mobile players who grab the same thing, it's going to put it in front of them and then snap, rotate, and snap position like by the half meter, and then just lock in place when they let go. That's an oversimplification, but the point is you kind of have to double the work. And that is an argument towards like, it is possible, you can do it. But this is a hard one for me. Oh man, it's hard. I'm mulling over the thoughts. There's a lot there to unpack, but I do really think that mobile is degrading VR experiences in general. So unfortunately, yes, that's what we've just done. So if you wanted to just focus on VR users, you might not want to use custom UI, and you can do the whole physical button thing that we did last time. Pretty cool. And custom UI is hard, so. But if you want the custom UI for the visual effect, there isn't a way to track the position of the button. I guess you could theoretically use custom UI and then put a trigger on the button so you can get the haptic feedback. Don't do that. Like, that defeats the purpose of custom UI. You can just use an image. You can use an imported image. That's a whole different topic though. So anyway, for another day. Okay, back over here on track. It doesn't look like we actually need the player here, so let's delete the player parameter as that's no longer used, which we can then delete out of here, and we can delete out of here, and we can delete out of these parameters here. We no longer need that player parameter. But because these were trigger enter events, we have the parameter. Let's leave it there because we have it. You never know when you might need that. Other things that I kind of want to change here is updating what these are called, because very soon we're going to switch to custom UI and it no longer will be a trigger. So this play pause, we're going to change it to call it a button. So we'll call this play pause button, and we'll call this the next track button. And then we can update these accordingly. Control C, Control V, coming back over here, Control V, Control C, Control V, Control. And if I haven't taught this yet to you, double clicking selects just that item. Single clicking highlights it, but double clicking, like, that's so hard to explain. Like, clicking one time, you haven't really selected the text. You just kind of highlighted the text. But then you double click it, now you've selected the text so you can copy it. If you triple click, it selects the entire line. Getting really good at using those single, double, and triple clicks. Because if you single click, you can Control C to copy the whole line, but if you double click, you just copy what you're highlighting. Oh, it's so, like, those explanations are hard. Anyway, so we've got this all set up. It's looking good. I think we're just about ready to go and test this, make sure it still works, then we can convert this to a custom UI script. So unfortunately, we are 30 minutes in and we haven't even gotten to the custom UI. Yowza! Does this not explain to you how hard custom UI is? I don't know. This is the integrations. These are the custom UI integrations. Custom UI, I literally, like, I've said this a million times, but I genuinely will spend an entire week building one custom UI. So this doesn't surprise me. I'm still surprised. I was like, man, this shouldn't have been that hard. But okay, so this should just work like before, because we've just reformatted the way that it works. Nice. Perfect. Works fantastic. So with that set up, it's now time to convert this to custom UI. The problem is this script was running on this trigger, right? There it is. Also, I'm noting that this is a asset. If you pulled this out of the asset library yourself, you're going to want to right click and unlink the instance root. That's going to allow us to make pretty significant changes to it very soon. I also want to unparent the children. So unparent child objects, so I can delete this massive group right there. And now we've just got all the things separated again. There's the Lakes Boombox model. Fantastic. Okay. Okay, so with that all ready to continue being modified, let's start by building a custom UI. And we're just going to go build gizmo, pull out a custom UI gizmo. There it is. And I'm going to shrink this down a little bit, just a little bit, down to 0.7, 0.7, and 0.7. I think that should just about fill the entire screen. It does look like it's still a little bigger the entire screen, so let's go 0.6. Did that do the trick? That did the trick. So we'll quickly even that out to 0.6, 0.6, 0.6. Fantastic. And I find that these come out reversed, so I'm going to rotate it by 180 degrees because I do think it'll probably be reversed. It's just from, and you can only see it from one side, so you won't know it. You'd have to like go all the way around and find out. But let's get these buttons appearing. And sounds so much easier than it is. We're going to delete the two triggers. So we have the skip track trigger and we have the play pause trigger. We'll delete those. We're then going to select the custom UI and call these the Boombox buttons. Boombox, I guess, is one word, so we'll lowercase that second one. And we can attach the script, which we're going to have to redo again. Let's rename the script real quick to match what it is now. So back here, we're going to right-click, rename symbol to, for whatever reason, I do like to go CUI underscore, then we call it play pause. You know, I think I am, man, CUI drives me nuts. Let's remove CUI for this one. It's a play pause music track custom UI. I'm almost thinking like I want to change the way I do it to change the final bit from entity to CUI, but then I'd want to change it from entity to trigger, and I really want to see the word entity because entity tells me that it needs to be attached to something. It's kind of like this warning symbol, whereas if I start seeing a bunch of different things like CUI, audio gizmo, I'm going to start missing out on what they're doing. So yeah, we'll stick with entity, but I'm just going to add CUI to the end of this, like right here. So play pause music track CUI. Okay. That should do the trick. Oh no, I messed it up. I don't know how I reverted it, but I clicked some button, reverted. Play pause music track CUI. Boom. All right, so now we've mirrored the name here. We should mirror the name on the file itself. So rename here, play pause, music, track, CUI. There we go. And inside of here, we no longer need the trigger, so we'll delete the trigger. Because it's a custom UI, we can delete the pre-start since we won't be using pre-start anymore. Because it's a custom UI, we need to change it from being a component to becoming a UI component. Then click enter. Looks like I can delete a couple of these things up here. Remember, that's not necessary. That's just for my brain. You'll notice here that this is upset because we don't have a, we're missing the initialize UI. And initialize UI happens before pre-start, so we'll put it here at the very beginning. Initialize UI needs to return a UI node. So for now, we'll just type in return a view and parentheses, curly braces, and that should be a happy for now. So that'll just keep the script from being upset, but inside this view is where we're gonna put the 2 buttons. We'll do that momentarily. And the start method is still gonna set up all of this stuff for us, and it's gonna update the text display, so this is all good. Let's make sure to reference everything on the properties panel of the UI. We also need to attach the script now that we've done all that. So we got our play, pause, music track, custom UI, referencing the text display, referencing the tap sound effects. There we are. All right, so that is all good to go. And most interestingly, we do have these visual buttons here. I would like to use images for those buttons. I think they're gonna be a lot more optimized too. So we're going to need to find some images. I think I'm gonna design those in Photoshop really quickly. I'll be right back. I know I said Photoshop, I meant Paint. I ended my Photoshop subscription. It was too expensive. Anyway, Paint, look at that, boom, I did it, pause button. We didn't even have a pause button before, so that's pretty cool. Let me upload these so I can show you what they look like. My assets. I don't know where to put these. I'll just create a new folder in here called UI icons and create. And then inside of that folder, I'm going to try to actually organize these. Create a new folder called Boombox. Boom. No pun intended. Fantastic. And then inside of the Boombox folder, I'll add new textures, upload files, head to downloads, grab the icons, boom, and open, import. Booyah. All right, so you'll see I've got these 3 icons I created. When we click on them, they're going to have an asset ID. There is that asset ID, and we can use that asset ID to make it visually appear as a play button. So let's start by getting that to work. And so inside of our view, this is where we're going to start actually creating the custom UI. We're going to create some children, and children is an array. And then after children, you want to get this ready, and it's your style properties, which is a JSON object of properties, which we'll fill out later. I'll leave that open here to fill out, put a red dot to remind me. And then we're going to go to our children and also press enter, because this is where we're going to put our 2 buttons. And so button number 1 is pressable. So we create a pressable. We type pressable. This isn't really how I would do it though. So let me show you how I'd actually do it, which is I'd come down here and create a new method called create button. And create button is very simply going to return a pressable, which is a UI node. There we go. And so we can just type return, and then we're returning a pressable, which is also parentheses, curly braces, and I'll put a semicolon on the end because I like semicolons. We'll press enter. The pressable also has children, so this is that sort of boxes inside of boxes idea. Put square brackets, comma, and it will also have a style, colon, curly braces, comma, and our children is going to be just a singular child, which is an image, and so we'll type image, which is also the same thing. This one does not have children though. I'm adding a comma to the end. There's a lot of little bits of formatting things. Adding a comma makes it so we can add more children to the pressable if we change our minds in the future. So it's just kind of like good practice to always have commas at the end of these lines. And so then inside of image, we're going to need the source for that image. And we'll come back to that in a second, so I'll just put a comma. We'll also need the style. So colon, curly braces, comma, enter, just as before. And this is the first place where I think we need to actually receive the image source. So you can see that a source is either an image or a bindable image. I think what we should do is make it, I think the thing that we need, oh man, this is confusing. What we need to know is which button is it. There's only 2 buttons. So we'll say is play pause button, and that will be a Boolean. And if that's true, we'll use that to determine which image is shown by default. And we'll come back to that momentarily. So then right up here under children, we can create that button by typing create button, parentheses, comma, and then inside of here, the first one will be the play button. So we'll type true, and then Control-C, Control-V, and the second one will be the alternate button, so that'll be false. And so now we're creating the 2 buttons. Fantastic. And so the reason I create these local methods is it makes it so much easier to read, and you don't have to do this styling twice for each button. You can use the same style properties, and then they're just shared, which is fantastic. So it saves you some typing. It also makes the script a lot shorter. Okay, so here under source, this is where we need to display, let's start simple, and the idea of using the pause button can come back, we can do that later. So for now, right here, before we return the pressable, we're going to create the image source. So we're going to say constant image source equals, and then we need a new, well, actually, we create the image source from image source dot from texture asset. And then inside of this, we need a new texture asset. And we can create the texture asset via the ID, but the ID is a big int. And so we type big int parentheses, and we want to use a string. Technically, it's a number, but it's a big int number. And if you use a regular number, it could get rounded. So you want to put single ticks for your string value. And then this is where we need to use this Boolean. And so what I'm going to do is put a semicolon at the end. I'm then going to type inside of this big int is play pause button. You're going to start seeing this because I love using it. You can then type question mark, and then we have 2 values. The first value is if it is true. So this says, if this is true, use the first one, else use the second one. It's basically a short if else. It's so fantastic. And so we're just going to come back down here, grab our play pause ID, jump back into here, and if it's play pause, we use this one. Else, we use the skip track. Copy and paste. There we go. Fantastic. Okay, so with that set up, our image source is now able to be used right here. So we'll just put image source in. And you might be thinking, awesome, we've got 2 buttons, they've got their images, but this isn't the hard part. The hard part is the styling, and we're going to do some good guesswork here because we know that we've got this as our area. In the middle there is text, which we should probably use the custom UI to display the text, which we weren't prepared for, but we can do that. So let's quickly do that. Let's add a text element in the middle. And so that is going to be, sorry, give me 2 seconds to think this through. What I'd like to do is make a text binding that we can update via the data file. And so we're going to go into the data file, and we're going to swap out text display from being a text gizmo to being a, we're going to say text display equals new binding of type text, which is a string, and the default text will be track name here. And then we update this on world start, so it doesn't matter that the default's track name here because it's going to get changed immediately on world start. And that will create errors elsewhere in our code, but first let's finish the custom UI. And to display this, the child that we're creating is a text child, so we'll type text. You'll notice that one was from Horizon UI. So when I was typing that, I was selecting this one from Horizon UI. Click enter. And then parentheses, you're getting used to it. Curly braces there first, add a comma to the end, press enter. Now text is just like image, you don't need children, so you just type text, colon, text goes here, comma, we still need style, so style, colon, curly braces, comma, press enter. We'll need to come back to style momentarily. And then on our text, we want to use that binding from the data file, so we'll go to the play pause music track data dot text display. I want to update the name of this to call it more accurately text display binding. And then we can Control C, Control V, Control save. We can actually delete text gizmo from this since we're no longer using it, and it bothers me. I like making fun of myself, it's fun. All right, so now we've got our play pause music track data dot text display binding set up here as our text. So it's going to start by displaying the text that we set inside of here, that string, which is track name here. But then over, hit Control save. We'll come back to the error down here in a minute. Oh, we can fix this right now. This is upset because there is no longer a text display. We can actually just delete this text display. We can also come down here and delete the text, display text. We can delete the play and pause custom model that we created, and the next track custom model can be deleted because we're going to put that right there where that was. It'll look good in a minute, promise. And so this is looking decent. Next, we're going to go to our play pause music track function. And right here, this is where we're going to fall into some issue because this is actually a binding. So we want to update the binding, which does not have a text property, but it does have a set property. So we can just delete this. It's also no longer potentially undefined. It is definitely a binding. So we don't have a question mark. So then we dot set it. Now, unfortunately, the font no longer applies. So we do want to delete this font line here. We can apply font while we're thinking about it inside of that style properties. So this is going to be our first style. So inside of text, we can change the font family to be bangers. So when you see I type single ticks, it gives me a drop-down list for all the font options available. We'll select bangers, add a comma. There's also options, as you saw, for font size, font weight. You can add underline and all sorts of other stuff. There's even ways to add like shadows. We don't have time to talk about all the options. This is something that I even have just scratched the surface on. So I encourage you to try just playing around with it and see what you learn. You might find some cool features out that you like or don't like. Like I don't actually like the shadow because I find it makes it look blurry to my eyes. But maybe you find a way to make it look good. So definitely play around with it. There's a lot of things you can do. Font size we're going to set to be 12 for now. I'm thinking actually 20 or 16. We'll start with 16 because I scaled the thing down. It would be like font 12 if it wasn't scaled down. So I'm thinking maybe even 20. We'll come back to that and play with it. All right, so we got our font family. We've got our font size. The button's been created. So this style is probably okay. And then over here, we are updating the track name appropriately, and there are no other errors. So all of that's going well. Coming back to our custom UI, we have got the images in, but we really need to get the sizing set up correctly. And so what I was trying to show you was that we needed this button to take up like 20% on the left, this button to take up 20% on the right. We needed the text to take up like 60% in the middle. With all of those percentages, we can actually apply that using style properties. And so coming back in here, if I hit play, like if I show you what this looks like, you won't see anything except for the text. And I think it's worth like demonstrating that stuff does happen, but we need those style properties. So let's go ahead and hit World Simulation on. And you can see there is Sugar Bytes right there. And it's far to the left because we haven't set up the size for our images. All right, so let's go ahead and keep working on the style, and we'll see it all come together at the end. So the first style we want to work with is the whole thing. This whole view has a style here. That's why it's red dotted, because this is an important one. And so in this style, we need to know that the width is 100%. We want to use the entire width. So you do single ticks, it's text, 100%. sorry, it's a string, so we need single ticks, and the text or the string inside, I keep using text because of this. It's throwing me off, I'm sorry. The width needs to be a string of 100%. We can then Control-C, Control-V, and do the same thing for height. Interestingly, we don't really need the height to be 100%, so we're going to do it anyway so that the math is always equal. So when we're doing the square images are like 10%, 10% or 20%, 20%, rather than like if I set the height here to 50%, then the square image would be like 20%, 10%, because you're using 20%. It's confusing. That's why we're going to use 100%. It'll just be easier, and everything else won't matter. Okay. I'm thinking we might want to go with the weird numbers, though, because I think the raycast will still raycast onto the upper edges. So if we really think we're only going to use 25%, let's go with 40%. Oh, man. This is tough. Yeah, let's go with 40%. It's going to make the math look weird in a minute, but that's okay. The text style is totally fine. It's just going to slot right in the middle. And we do want this to be in a row. So we want to change the flex direction to be row. There we go. That's going to make it so that the items are arranged in a row. There's also row reverse if you want to do them in the opposite direction. But we've got them in the direction that we want, so that's good. Now, the creating button down here is where we need to do our next style. And so here, for our pressable, the pressable is the kind of like outside box. So we've got this first box, which is 100% on the width and 40% on the height of the custom UI gizmo. Then this next box for this button needs to be let's go with 30%, so 75% of the height. So we'll say height, colon, 75%, which I mean, if I'm going to do that, we can just change this to 30%. Like this will be a lot easier because we can just shift the height to shift the height of this. So we'll say height equals 100%, so it's always going to match that height. And then if we Control-C, Control-V, we then know that the width will always be this same as the height, which means we can create a variable in here which we can call image height percent, which will be equal to 30%. And by doing this, it'll make it easier for us to not have to write this over and over again. So we got the image height percent is 30%. Then down here, when we need to change this, we only have to change it in one place. So we're going to call that image height percent. And right here for our width, we want the width to be the image height percent as well. And hopefully you're following along, because I know there's a lot of numbers here, but we're using the height of this is 100%, which means it's actually only 30%, which is why 30% works for the width here. Okay. Then the image is going to fill this entire 30% by 30% cube. So we're going to use 100%, Control-C, Control-V, and 100%, because we're filling the entire box. Shift-Alt-F. And Control Save. So I'm going to do one last demo for anyone who needs this. So you've got your whole custom UI, right? We're going to shrink it 30% because we don't need the top and bottom. We then want the image to represent a 30% cube, so we've said it's 30%, right? So that's the image. There we go. And then of that 30%, once we've created that pressable button, this is the pressable button area, we then want the image to fill that whole 100% of that area, because we've defined it. We're like a box inside of a box inside of a box. So that's why we think of these in boxes and boxes, because it really is. So now that we've got this 100%, 100% set up, that should do the trick. The problem is we don't have our spacing set up on the left and right sides. We will come back to that, but we should have something visually appealing when we hit World Simulation on. And we do have an issue. We'll come back to it, but like, this is the play button, this is the pause button, and this here is the text. What you're seeing with it being there twice is a bug. Oh, whoa. Interesting. Okay, cool. We're gonna work through this. But anyway, this bug is a horizon bug. Just hit Control-D to duplicate and then delete the original. And now you've got the correct, like this is what's actually being displayed. That other text was just left over from the previous one. So what we can see here very clearly is that the text needs to get a lot bigger and these images need to be cut in half. So we're going to say world simulation off. We're going to go to our play pause. We're going to change this from 30% down to like 15%. Like seriously, 15% sounds good. And then our text needed to go up to at least 20. Let's try 22, control save. And let's see what that looks like. Now this does need to compile, so give that a moment to compile. Clear and clear and clear one more time. World simulation on. And we get that same bug. Let's control D and delete this one. World simulation back on. Now you can see what that actually looks like. And that's starting to look pretty good. Now if I click on the thing, you can see we're not using very much of it, right? These images are only 15%. We want spacing on the left and right sides. The text is a decent size. It could be a little bit bigger. So let's change that font size one more time. And so we're going to go in here, change the font size to 32, control save. What you'll also note is we want that to be centered. And I almost felt like the buttons were still too big, but the text getting bigger should be the trick. So now on the text, we want the left and right sides to have some padding and the top to have some padding. We call that margin, sorry, padding is a different thing. So we're gonna say margin top. This is what's gonna allow us to center it. There's other ways to center, but this is just the easiest one that I know of. And we're just gonna make it 5% from the top. That could do the trick, although, I like to stick with percents when possible, but in this case, because we're already percenting on percenting, let's go with a fixed number, like 10 pixels from the top. And then let's do margin left and right. So margin left, and this one I think we can use percentage because we're using width 100%. So I think this percentage will behave as intended. So we'll say 10% spacing on the left, and then comma, control C, control V, and then margin right will also have 10%. And so this is creating some space between the images and the text. And once that's finished compiling, we're going to duplicate this while it's compiling. Control D, delete the top one, wait for that to finish compiling. Looks like it's done. We can now hit world simulation on. Now we're talking. Look at that. It almost fills the entire width. It's so good. Now, we do want this to be centered. So I believe another trick is if you leave the world running, we can come down here and change this to be align self center. I think that could work. I have trouble with aligning center. Like for whatever reason, it doesn't do what I want it to do. So this is compiling right now, and because I haven't turned world simulation off, it tends to let the scripts work correctly. Like this UI will work correctly. I just was forgetful because I always stop the world, so it's like bad habit. Doesn't seem to have changed anything, which is actually what I would have expected to happen. I really don't know how to center things. If you know how to center this, put some information in the comment section, please. I'd love to pin it. This is very much one of those weird problems where it seems like it should have worked. Align content. There's a lot of ways to do this. So we can center the content. We can try that. There's one other option I'm going to try next, which I think is another really good option. So just give this a second. Did that do the trick? It doesn't look like it did anything. Now, of course, this could be a horizon bug, and I actually have to stop the world and start the world. So just in case, world off, world on. Didn't change anything. Okay, world off again. We're going to need to duplicate that to see it next time. We'll come back to that. So these two lines did nothing. So the next thing I wanted to show you is there's a feature called, what is it? It's called something, it's, what is it? Align content. Line content, colon, space between. This is the one that I think we should use. And what this is going to do is it's going to add this margin left and right for us. So we can actually delete this since this will add the space for us. And if I'm not mistaken, it will center it as well. It should center it. I'm hopeful. Now, I am just going to hit play world before we duplicate because... No, that did not work. Darn it. Let's duplicate it so you can see what it actually looks like. And delete and play. Yeah, it removed all the spacing. I thought that would work. Was that just because... Align content. Is it a different thing that I'm looking for? Align self, colon, space between? That's not an option, no. There might be a different property that does this. Let's see if it's something called content. Justify content. That sounds right. Space between. This is custom UI, guys. There are so many options. A lot of them seem to do almost nothing or do not what you expect them to do. And then eventually you find the one that you're actually looking for. It's probably justified content is what I'm looking for. So clear, world simulation is still running. Hey, look at that, it worked. We do need to stop the world because for whatever reason that didn't work. Control D, delete the old one, world simulation on. There we are. That's exactly what we wanted. That is exactly what we wanted. That is so perfect. So now that we have this doing exactly as intended, we can now rotate that into position. Now, I'm also noticing the scale of this gizmo is frustrating. I would love to have that centered, but for whatever reason, this gizmo is just going to be off-centered. Once again, if you know what you know, please let us know. And for us, we're just going to manually rotate this until it's roughly in line. Then going to slide it down, and I'll show you the trick that I used to use with the text gizmo. And that is to get it right about here, pull it up until it's just slightly askew, right like that. And then what we can do is grabbing the rotate tool, slowly rotate that, like that, perfect. And then slide that down. We get the same thing happening. We can do the same thing with the rotate tool. It's a little bit easier with the text gizmo, but this is not too bad. It's a lot easier to tell how bad this is in VR when you have depth perception. Oh, that's perfect. It goes through instantaneously, so it's flat, it's flush. And I want to lift it up just a little bit. Now, because we've set this up in such a way where it fills the area, we can actually just change the scale of this to 0.5, 0.5, 0.5. And now that looks pretty good. We just need to center it on our display, which is harder than it sounds. There we go. And if I'm not mistaken, right here we have it set to spatial, raycast distance at 3 meters, focus prompt at 2.5 meters. Go into preview mode. We walk over. For whatever reason, the E button is down below. That actually looks pretty good on this. Oh my goodness, you've got to be kidding me. Seriously? I could... What? That is not what I expected to happen. I expected it to use the space that we had filled out, because we set it to not be 100%. Okay, you know what we're going to do? This is going to be a little bit complicated, but I think it's the right approach. So we know that we're only using 15% of the image height, which right here we were using, so for height. But if we take 15% and we add to it, we'll take 100%, subtract 15, you're at 85. Let's call that roughly 40%. So 40% plus 15 is 55%. So if we set the height to be 55%, then we just need to move this stuff to the bottom by saying right here, we can do it right below height. Margin on the top of 40%, which 40% of 55% is actually a lot more. You'd have to do 40 over 55. Ay, ay, ay. Let's do something, let's please do something easier, like 80%. Margin top of 80% of the 55%. Does that work? Because you're doing top of the height. If we set the height to 100% again, it doesn't matter, because then we can just do the 40% margin from the top. Yep. We could even do the 42%, 42.5% if we wanted to get really precise. Okay. And then we know that this stuff needs to fit inside of 15%. So creating the button, because this is in the space where it is 100%, we actually need to change this to be the same as this one. So we'll just copy, Control C, Control V. So now these have the same image height percent. And the text needs to be shifted down. It probably will work. Probably will work. Let's hit Control Save and see what that looks like. World simulation is still on, so it might actually update nicely for us. Oh, it's going to move down, right? There it is, perfect. It didn't move nicely for us, but we can at least slide it into place before we duplicate it. So selecting that, sliding it up, and right into place. Perfect. There we are. Custom UI, it takes some finesse, it really does. Control D, delete the top one, and you can see that that looks nice. We'll jump into preview mode, walking over, pressing E. Fantastic, exactly what we'd like it to do. We've got the text, it's easy to read. If you were in VR, you'd be able to read that as well. We could make the text font size bigger and adjust some things again, but that is looking really good. So now we need to make the buttons work. So it's not that hard because we made that function file, so that's a huge plus. And so in here on the pressable, a pressable has a feature called on press. We're going to put that before style. So we're going to call the on press, and it says the called when the player presses down the controller, trigger, or mouse. So on press colon, it is a callback function. So arrow function, we have the player, and we arrow to the right to our curly braces, our function. And then inside of here, we want to say if parentheses is play pause button, then we're going to go to our play pause music track function file dot call play pause button, parentheses, passing in the player. We remember we don't need the player, but we're passing it in just because we can. We're then going to say else, curly braces, and the same line of code, Control C, Control V, delete this, and switch this out to the next track button. There we go. And with that, we've now made it so this works. That wasn't too bad. That wasn't too bad at all. That was not so bad. Oh my gosh. All right, we're gonna delete this, Control Save. So much more to show. Check out that document I mentioned at the very beginning. I will put a link to it below. Let's go ahead and try this out, see it working. We're just above an hour. That's not too bad. I expected it to be a lot shorter, but that's not too bad. All right, resuming, clicking, playing. Okay, I thought that was gonna work. Clicking again. That's weird. Skip track. Okay, nothing is working. Oh, is this because I need to duplicate it? Yeah, that would make sense. Control D, delete the old one. World simulation on, preview, E. A. I heard the sound effect of the click. I don't hear the music though. Click again. Okay, this is that same bug we had last time we built this boombox, where it doesn't work for the first time for whatever reason, but if you leave and come back, it'll start working. Really dumb audio gizmo bug. We can just go to our creation home and come back and see it works. We did it! Woo! I'm so happy. That was what it was. Custom UI. Like, I'm saying 3 hours for this introduction deep dive, but when I used to teach that document that I'm referring to, it took 3 hours to teach. So, and I want to add more to that, but I'm probably going to cut some other stuff out. But it would not be surprising if the custom UI initial first tutorial is like 4 hours long. But once you've got that foundation, we can then go build custom UIs like this one, where it doesn't take as long because you already know a bunch of stuff. The problem is when you want to make it do stuff, right? Like we spent half of this tutorial just getting the function set up, and that was after an already 40-something minute tutorial to build the first boombox. So to put it lightly, this stuff is difficult. It's very rewarding because it works so well in VR and on cross screens. But when you think about like the original boombox only took, I think, 45 minutes. compared to this taking 107 or an hour and 7 minutes, I think is where we're at right now, to get to just make that boombox mobile compatible. It was already mobile compatible, right? Like, it just wasn't perfect. Anyway, let's go. One more test on the boombox. Can't believe it. So happy. Okay, I'm done. So cool. World simulation on, preview mode, walking in, and it works first time, right? Dun, 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 dun. Pause, totally working. Skip to next track. Pause, skip, play. Such a good song. Oh my gosh, like totally an earworm. So good. All right, boombox. One more thing. Okay, somebody was chanting that. I don't know who that was. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's because you forgot about the pause button, didn't I? I did. It's okay. We're going to do it. For those of you who wanted it, I am going to go the extra mile. Let's get this pause button up here. And what we're going to do is make it so that the play pause image is swapped out when you press the play pause button. Now this takes 2 major steps. They're not difficult, so bear with me here. It's going to be easy. First thing we need to know is if the music is paused or playing. You'll remember that that variable is local to our function file. What we need to do is move it into our data file since this needs to be accessed by others. So we're going to delete it from here. We're then going to go to our data file, and we're going to create that right here. We're going to say is playing, and this is playing should be a binding. And I just remembered I can create bindings right here. I don't actually have to put them up here, so this is nice. We'll say new binding of type Boolean. Oh boy, I just remembered something. Oh man. We're going to need 2 things. We need the binding and we need the is playing value. Okay, we're going to bring the is playing value back into here. We're going to keep that local because it really is only needed here, but we need this binding so that we can update the UI. And then the default value for this binding is going to be is playing is false by default. Okay? Now, as I just mentioned, you can put bindings in here, and because I really do like to put my bindings inside of these areas, I'm going to move our text binding right here into here, and I'm going to move my bindings to the bottom so that they're right next to each other. I can then delete this line. This is just mentally makes my mind happy because I don't have as much stuff up here. It makes it easier to get to the exports to see what's being exported. Anyway, just personal preferences. There's no right or wrong. Now back here in our, we'll start here and then we'll go update the functions. And so on this image binding, you'll notice that we said image source and we got these numbers, yada, yada, yada. The problem is that this only works, this really only works for the skip track button, which doesn't change. So what we need to do is have another ternary operator, right? That's what they're called. I'm pretty sure, ternary. So we say is play pause button, question mark, and if it is the play pause button, we need to do something different. And we're gonna put just a quick function here. We'll come back to that in a second, colon, and then the image source from above is what we wanna do if it is the not play pause button. So we can just delete this whole if statement here and cowabunga. We're then going to cut this, Control X, and paste it right here on the right. This is what we're doing if the value is, sorry, my brain is slowing down right now. it's getting to like 80 something degrees in my office, and whenever, like, this is why I try to record tutorials in the morning, because as soon as it gets too hot, my brain just really starts frying. Sip of bubbly might help. Nice and cold, very good. Okay, so on the right side, that's our else, right? So is play pause button. If it's false, we are using just that one skip track button, skip track image. But if it's true, what we need to do is say, we need to create a binding. That's what we need to do. We need to use a binding here. And that's where I'm like, isn't there a better way to do this? Like, if I said new binding of type image source, and then curly or parentheses, and then we made that the same way we made this one. So we can just copy this code here, Control C, paste it right there. Am I missing one parenthesis? I might be missing one parenthesis. There we are. And then we need to get that play button. There we go, copy the ID again. Okay, so what we've done is create a binding for our source if it's the play button. The problem is we don't have access to that binding because it's stored here. So what we're gonna do is just undo a little bit. Sorry, I'm like figuring this out on the fly. And this is kind of like literally how I process, right? So you're just seeing live problem solving here. And so we need to use this image source, and it might be a binding, right? Like, so now if we hover over image source, it could be two things. Come on. Image source is either an image source or it's a binding image source. Now, technically, we could just make it always be a binding, but bindings are stored in memory, and if we're trying to be optimized. But from a standpoint of like making it super easy, the right answer is just to make it a binding because it's super easy. So let's just go with the binding. So new binding, image source dot from texture, and what we need to do next is then paste the same thing. Like, we're literally undoing so much. I'm so sorry. I think we should actually just hit undo. I'm literally just gonna hit undo. I'm so sorry. This is a few mistakes, too many. All right, Control Shift Z. All right, back down here, as we were, we have image source being defined as an image source from texture asset, where if it's true, it's the play button, else it's the other one. Now, if we put parentheses around this whole thing, whoop, nice big old fat parentheses, we can then go in front of that and say new binding of type image source, brackets, and so this has a default image source of this value. And only if it's the play pause button will we be updating the image source binding. So we can now change this to be called a binding since it is a binding. And then we'll Control C that here, Control V that here. And now this image source binding, oh boy, I'm crazy. I literally am, I must be crazy. I don't know why I'm making so many mistakes. It's driving me nuts. I'm so sorry. This stuff is hard. That's what it is. Like, this stuff is just hard. So like, don't feel bad if you're struggling. Is playing is a Boolean binding. We need to derive that Boolean binding right here for image source. I don't know why I didn't think about this sooner. We don't need to make this a binding. One more set of undo. One more set of undo. I'm so dumb. Okay. Right here, we delete image source and we type the data file, the play pause track data file, dot is playing, dot derive. And deriving allows us to take the value, which the value is a Boolean. So we'd say is playing. We now have the is playing Boolean, which we can then arrow function. And then inside this arrow function, we just need to return the image source. And what we can say here is if, parentheses, is play pause button, then curly braces, else, if it's not the play pause button, it's not going to change. So we're just going to use this. So Control C. We can then type return. Now this does mean that both buttons are updating every time there's a binding update. It's not optimized, okay? This is not optimized, but it should be fine. Totally should work just fine. We no longer need to do this is play pause button thing here. We can just delete this side and just use the right hand side for this one. And then on this side, we need to do one more if else, which we can do using the same thing we did up here, right? So we were just going to copy that. I think it's still in our copy paste, so we'll just type return, paste, and then the left-hand side is if it's playing, so we can now use the is playing boolean that we got from deriving. So if it's playing, we want to use the pause button, because you can pause it if it's playing, so Control C, and then we'll paste the play button on the right-hand side, so if it's not playing, you can play it. And then we need to go get the pause button image. All right, we finally got there. We got there in the end. Oh man, I really am like flabbergasted at how many mistakes I made there. Now the only thing we need to do is go back to the function file, and anywhere we are updating is playing, we need to update the binding. Not if we're viewing the value. Right here we're just viewing the value, but here when we toggle the music, this is where we change it. So we're saying it's not playing. We can then call the play pause function file dot, not function file, the data file dot is playing. That's supposed to be a binding. Let's rename that as a binding. I name all of my bindings bindings. Some people hate that, but for me, it's like I need to know that it's a binding because it's a different is playing boolean, right? So I like it. Anyway, personal preferences all around. Is playing binding dot set allows us to set the value to our local is playing boolean, and that's the only place we're setting the value, so we're done. Over here, we need to change this to the binding because I renamed it. Control save. Okay, and I'd say time, but time is just like, who cares about time these days? Clear. Let's let that compile. Duplicate this because you know it's not going to work. Delete that. Clear one more time. World simulation on. Play. Walking over. We hit the play button. There's the pause button. We can pause it. We can play it. You'll notice it takes a second to load the pause button the first time. That's because it's now stored on my device, so it doesn't, it's now there like instantly, but the first time it has to download it. That's so cool. That's weird that's not playing right there. Oh, that's that audio bug we were talking about. There we go. Makes sense. But yeah, that looks pretty good. I'm not a fan of the pause button being centered compared to the, like, I think I need to fix my image. So if you were curious how I made these images, I'll just end with that real quick, because it's not that hard. Like, this will take 2 seconds to fix. And making your own icons, come on now. Like, what the heck? Let's go. Right click, open with paint. And so I used the shape tool to create the shapes. I then used the dump bucket to fill it with white. And then zooming out, I can see the whole thing. I'm going to use the selection tool to select this one. Then I'm going to drag it over to the left, make sure I line it up using this grid on the background. And I am 1, 2, 3 from the top, 1, 2, 3 from the top. And that looks just about right. Move it over to the right till it's in all the way. That should do right about there. Do the exact same thing on this side. I could also just right arrow. Oh, yeah, that does not do what I think it does. I'm using shift right arrow, which would have worked in Photoshop. It doesn't do it here. I have to use just right arrow. Okay, perfect. I don't like how those look though. So I noticed that if I hit shift left arrow, it made it thicker. So I kind of just want to do that for both of these. So I'll just shift right arrow, make it thicker. So that should make it look decent in Horizon. Nice. I do think that needs to be just a tad thicker, but it could be my eyes playing tricks on me. just one little bit thicker. Shift right arrow. Nice. Okay, so with those set up, I can then show you that if you click on layers, I did have to turn off the background. So using this button here. Anyway, save as PNG. Save this as pause 2. Press save. Close. Close. Asset library, we'll just go quickly upload that and then swap the ID in. Very simple. Horizon. Oh, I forgot. I was in preview mode. Horizon, world simulation off, my assets. There it is. Add new texture to the folder. Choose file. Pause number 2. Press open. Import. And we'll be able to see it immediately. Ooh, I don't know if I like that, but okay. We're going with it. We'll see if it feels better. We can always switch back real quick. So this is the pause icon and control save. That's going to take a second while it's compiling. We'll control D, delete the original, go back to the console to see compilation is still occurring. You can see the dot up there. It looks like it's just finished. World simulation on, preview, walking over, pressing. All right. Yeah, that feels better. That definitely feels better. Okay, cool, cool. Oop, not what I meant to do. Booyah! Okay, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. We're actually done. I hope that's everything that you wanted and a little bit more. Thank you so much for following along. Looking forward to making that custom UI tutorial in the future. I don't know if it's going to happen in the next week, but I will keep it top of mind as it is a big topic we definitely need to cover. Alrighty. Without further ado, ta-ta, bye!